Congressman Khanna of California. Congressman, good to see you this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. So as you saw there in Lydia Hu's report, more and more Americans are either turning back to food banks or going there for the first time. A lot of that a function of the COVID relief money drying up. And many Democrats are pushing for more relief in the form of some kind of Build Back Better plan. But the question is, how do you help folks out without exacerbating the current inflation that this nation is in?
Well, two ways, John. On gas prices, doing what the president did, which is have a big release of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We need to continue to release that and purchase at the dips. We also need to ban exports to places like China, not have our gas exported. And on food, I think we can buy, as a government, some of the food and resell it at a cheap price to Americans to put downward pressure on prices. Both of those would help stabilize prices.
What about the idea of more stimulus? Are you in favor of that or against?
Well, I'm for a windfall profits tax on the profits of big oil companies and giving a check, an inflation rebate check to working class Americans so that they can have a bit more money in their pockets to make expenses. So we need to do that, but we also have to have an effort to stabilize prices.
So more and more people, again, going to food banks, finding it harder to cope with inflation, finding it harder to put staples on the table. What effect is that going to have, do you believe, in November? Because the president's poll numbers are pretty low at the moment, and this just seems to be another crisis that's on his table. And it might appear as well that he's got pretty long coattails when it comes to these congressional races.
Well, John, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, people are frustrated and upset. Gas prices are still too high, and there's a threat with the European sanctions, by the way, that gas may spike come October and November. We have to deal with that, and we have to be aggressive. And people in my district complain about the grocery bill, complain about what they're having to pay for eggs, for milk. So we need to, every day in the Congress, in the White House, morning, afternoon, and evening, tell the American people, what are we doing to lower prices? What are we doing to provide economic relief? What are we doing to make sure that flights aren't getting canceled all over airports? What are we doing to make sure baby formula is back in the shelves? I mean, these are real issues, and that's what the focus ought to be of the Congress and the White House.
Let me come back to gasoline prices because you mentioned it. And yesterday, the White House was taking credit for gasoline prices coming down after blaming first Vladimir Putin and then the oil companies for them going up, prompting this exchange between a reporter at the White House and one of the president's economic advisors, Jared Bernstein. Listen here.
Aren't you having it both ways, Jared? Because when the gas prices go up, it's got nothing to do with the president. When we see some decline, you want him to get the credit.
Look, I think that there's no both-way thinking here at all. The president has reacted from the beginning, talking about how this was such an important priority. He then presided over the largest historical release of barrels of oil from the Strategic Reserve. So it
was Putin's fault. When they're coming down, he gets the credit.
Yeah, I very much disagree with that framing.
So let's take a look at it. Nothing has changed in Ukraine. The war is still raging there. So that would seem to poke a hole in this idea of a Putin price hike if the war is still going on and prices are coming down. Secondly, when the president released oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, it didn't have much of an effect on prices. What seems to be driving the price of oil down is uncertainty about how much people are going to buy in the future because the price is so high. So is it really the president that had this effect?
Well, look, I think the president deserves credit for the release of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but the president can do more. The president can have a greater release by buying oil when it's low. He can ban exports. We can have a tax on big oil. But I never bought into the let's just blame Putin. I believe that ultimately we have to have policies that are going to lower prices, and we can do that with the ones I outlined. The other thing is we've got to figure out how do we aggressively try to have diplomacy and some settlement to the war. We can't have that war be never ending, or the American people, the working class, are going to continue to pay the largest price for that.
Yeah, no question about that, and Ukraine as well.